Today's class will be conducted on this topic, as you see on the screen, that is constructing cultures, the politics of travelers' tales. And in this regard, we know that literature may be produced by the travelers. And in case of comparative literature, literature of several cultures, literature of several languages can be compared. And in this regard, that we have discussed in our previous class, that Michel Foucault, he has uh, Michel Foucault, he has talked about the French philosopher. He has talked about the comparative literature. So we know novel, drama, poetry, and the other genre of literature can be compared. Foucault has said that competition may be conducted in two different ways. What are the ways? First one, that is the comparison of measurement, which analyzes into the units in order to establish relationship of equality and inequality, and that of the order, which establishes the simplest elements and arranges the difference. And comparative literary study has tended in the past to be overly concerned with the first type of comparison, setting up canons of primary and secondary author, greater and lesser text, stronger and weaker culture, majority and minority languages, and trying hard to keep the ideological implications of such hierarchization out of sight. So such kind of comparison in comparative literature is a one kind of comparison that has been told by Michel Foucault. And another type of comparison that he has said, that is the accounts of journeys, of the diaries, letters, translations, and tales told by travelers of their experience of other cultures. When a person visits another culture, he or she sees the culture, and from his or her observation, he or she writes diaries, letters, and translation, and also the travel experience. This kind of literature can also be compared in comparative study or comparative literature. And such kind of comparison, as told by Michel Foucault, that is the second category of comparative literature. And in this regard, we have talked about in our previous class about map making. Okay, and we have talked about Troudov, and he has also historian, philosopher, and structuralist, literary critic, sociologist, and essayist. And we have talked about his writings, and also we have talked about another man, an Englishman at home and abroad. He has written a book of an Englishman at home and abroad. So such kind of literature, such kind of literary production can be compared in comparative literature. And map making is also another way of the cultural projection in literature. In this regard, we have several maps, and the map maker's intentions play a vital role in map making. And in this regard, as we see in the screen, that at the two poles of the independent map of Europe is the vanished island of Iceland in the North Atlantic, and the huge expanding Turkic realm in Asia. It says a great deal about how we structure our world. It means that map makers do not play objective role in making maps of the world, and we structure the world. And naturally, we see that the upper side of the map of the world is the northern side, the lower side is the southern, and the right hand side is the eastern, and the left hand side is the western side. Is this structure real of a map? And here in comparative study, say that we structure our world that we have come to want our maps to be constructed along latitudinal and longitudinal lines. It means that what a map maker wants, he will be putting map in his own perception. Which side will be the northern side of the world, which will be the western side. If we take that Iceland is in the northern side of the map, it means that, but we also know that the world is round in shape, and if the world is round in shape, there is no fixed position of northern poles and the southern poles. So it depends on the map maker's mentality, how the map maker will structure the map of the world. A glance at alternative mapping conventions such as the Mappa mundi. Mappa mundi is any medieval European map of the world. And such maps range in size, and some includes figures and stories from history, the Bible, and classical mythology. Also shown on some maps are exotic plants, beasts, and races. So, Mappa mundi is a form of medieval map. Mappa mundi shows what happens to the mental concept of the world. Mappa mundi is structured. Mappa mundi maps structured the world. However, what happens to the mentality of the map maker? It has come to our knowledge if we study Mappa mundi. When such linear conventions are not used, the top of the world is not the north. According to Mappa mundi's map, we see that north side is not the top of the world, but the east, according to their definition, where the sun god rises in glory and the center of the earth, as Dante tells us in his Divine Comedy. Dante, the Italian narrative poem writer, and it is widely considered to the a preeminent work of Italian literature and one of the greatest works of world literature. So Dante's Divine Comedy is a narrative poem, a long narrative poem. And in this regard, in Divine Comedy, Dante also support the issues of Mappa mundi. Mappa mundi, they put the definition that the top of the site is the eastern side of the world, from where sun rises. And some kind of notion was placed by Dante in his Divine Comedy, and he said that Jerusalem is the center of this world, not the other part. Jerusalem is the center of the world. This is the idea of making maps. And the presence of the dog-headed beings, bat-eared humans, mermaids, and griffins depicted in the Mappa mundi have long since been dismissed by more rational and scientific ages. As we have understood, as we have seen, that in case of Mappa mundi, they will be presenting the presence of exotic plants, beasts, and races. So according to the medieval maps, Mappa mundi, they give some idea of some peculiar types of animals and human beings, just like dog-headed beings, bat-eared humans, mermaids, and griffins depicted in Mappa Mundi. But next time, such kind of depiction was discarded by the rational and scientific ages. So, map making become a preconceived idea of the map maker that has been discarded by the rational and scientific thinking of the scholars and the historians of the world. But the independent map of Europe in the 1990 decade shows up the fallacy of that belief of objectivity. So what is the objective map? What is the objectivity of map making? For our acceptance of mapping conventions of whatever period, we consign our belief into the hands of map maker, just as when we read a translation, we want to trust the good faith of the translator. We have discussed a little bit in our previous class that when a text is translated by a translator, he becomes the secondary author of the writer. Is the original text is in same in content and pattern is in the translated text or not? In this regard, we have also understood that translator plays a very vital role in translation studies, and the preconceived idea uh, of the translator plays a very significant role in translation studies. Though we have also understood that after making translation, a literature became the part of that language, of that uh, literary production after getting translation. In this regard, as we read as a translation, we want to trust the good faith of the translation. That means that means the researcher, the comparative comparatist, they want to keep faith on the translator. That means the translator will do their role well, not like the map makers. And as has already been pointed out, the activities of map making, translating and writing about one's travels are never totally innocent activities. So Susan Bassnett has claimed that map making, translation studies, and also writing about, that means that the journey, travel history, and the travel experience are not the innocent activities in literary production. Translator mentality, map maker's mentality, and the traveler's mentality, and the preconceived idea or preconceived notion of their culture plays vital role in map making, translation studies, and also in traveler style. In this regard, another Italian translator, how we can have another example in our hand, Claudio Magris. He has written a book that is Danube, explores the history of the binary opposition of North and South in European cultural history through the journey down to the Danube and the river that flows out of the heart of the Europe towards the east, starting with the source of the Danube, which is also virtually the same as that of the Rhine. He looks in both directions, contrasting the symbolic significance of the two great rivers. So Danube and Rhine, these are the two great rivers in Europe. And based on these two rivers, this person, Claudio Magri's Italian translation, he has read a book. You can see the picture of this book. That is, the name of this book is Danube. And also you see the map of the river Danube. And also, you see that this is the map. It started from here and ends up to there. That is Black Sea. Danube is the Europe's second longest river after the Volga. It is located in Central and the Eastern Europe. Danube was once a long-standing frontier of the Roman Empire and today flows through 10 countries. The river runs through the largest number of countries in the world. So this is Danube. And the Rhine is one of the major European rivers which has its sources in Switzerland and flows in a mostly northerly direction through Germany and the Netherlands and emptying into the North Sea. And you see the map of this river Rhine. So these two river, great rivers in Europe, Rhine and the Danube, based on these two rivers, the Magritte has written a book titled Danube. So what he has said, and he has written a poem, the Song of the Nibelungs. The Rhine and the Danube have confronted and challenged each other. So the cultural confrontation he has put in a poem, that is, he placed. And these two rivers are explained in such a way that they are culturally constructing each other, challenging each other. The Rhine is a different symbol of Germanic virtues and purity. So river presents the cultural presentation. In this regard, the writer said that the Rhine presents the Germanic virtues and purity. How? The loyalty of the Nibelungs and chivalric heroism, dauntless love of the destiny of the Germanic soul. The Danube is Penuia, the kingdom of Attila, the Eastern Atlantic tide, which at the end of the Song of Nebulus overwhelms Germanic values when the Burgundians cross it on their way to the treacherous Hunnicourt, their fate and the Germanic fate is sealed. So this is the poem, the Song of the Nebulous, which most contemporary Europeans know only through Wagner. The part of the body of the Germanic epic poetry that reached its highest point to the Norse sagas of medieval Iceland. Significantly and very significantly, elite if you consider the marginal position of the Iceland today, the topographical terms, and in terms of European cultural history, the great Norse sagas remained outside of the mainstream of the medieval Europe. The sagas are the great European absent text, a central part of the contemporary Icelandic culture, but largely unknown anywhere else. Had they been known, they might have challenged the history of the European literary production. So, such kind of presentation by the map makers and also the travelers, that is, they have put Danube and uh, Rhine River, they have confronted and challenges each other. But here we see the scenario is different. And because they are relatively unknown, they offer, instead of that fascination of what might have been, text and art to Iceland, what the works of Hesiod and Homer are to Greece, the preface to W.H. Auden and Paul Taylor's Norse poem attests. So such kind of presentation we see in map making and by the travel writers. So this is the contest of Homer and Hesiod. The contest of Homer and Hesiod is a Greek narrative that expands a remark made in Hesiod's work and days to construct a imagined poetical agon between Homer and Hesiod. In Works and Days, Hesiod claimed he won a poetry contest, receiving the prize, a tripod, which he dedicated to the muses of Mount Helicon. So Homer and Hesiod. So we see such kind of map making. In this regard, we get another travel writer and historian. What he says, his name is William Kingslake. He is an English travel writer and historian. And he was called to the bar in 1837 and built up a thriving legal practice. So this is the history. So this English travelers and historian, what he has said, He said that if the volcanic ruggedness of the Iceland is seen as a symbolic of the virtues of the recent and the self-discipline, the beauties of the Turkey and especially the Istanbul are repeatedly seen in terms of sensuality. So this writer, he has said that Turkey and especially the Istanbul, by the travel writer, they have put in such a way that always they have been presented as a terms of sensuality. Travelers' tales of sexual encounters with veiled ladies abound. So they have put such kind of description in their writings. It is mentioned by the English uh, writer, travel writer, and the historian Alexander Kingslake. What he said, according to him, the history of one such meeting in the streets of Constantinople, he said that of her very self you see nothing except the dark, luminous eyes that stare against your face and the tips of the painted fingers depending like rosebuds from out of the black bastions of the fortress. She turns. So this is the description of a woman in Istanbul, Constantinople. She turns and turns again and carefully glances around her on all sides to see what she is safe from the eyes of the Mussulman. And then suddenly withdrawing the yes mark, she shines upon your heart and soul with all the pomps and might of her beauty. So such kind of presentation is presented by the travelers who traveled Turkey, especially in Istanbul. They have described the veiled women in such a way. And Alexander Kingslake has claimed that such kind of presentation in travel writing is full of sensuality. Another writer, travel writer, English poet, Julia Parrott. She is also a novelist, historian, and traveler. Her most popular work, The City of the Sultan and Domestic Manners of the Turks. So, such kind of presentation by Alexander Kingslake. But what will happen if the travel writer become a woman? So this female writer, that means Julia Parrott, she has also written the story about the city of Sultan and the domestic manners of the Turks, presented in the Turkish upper class with the sympathy and humanity. So what we see in case of the male travel writer, they have presented the story in such a way that uh, always Turks, Istanbul, Constantinople, the women have been presented as as something related to sensuality. But Julia Pardo, she has presented Turks women, especially the upper class women, with sympathy and humanity. She has said, Kingslake accepted to be believed that his fantasies about veiled beauties in the back states of the Constantinople masked the preconception of his readers. Actually, we see that what Kingslake has presented, it is the preconceived idea of the readers. And in order to entertain the concept of the readers, Kingslake has written something about the Turkish women. Julia Pardo, in common with many other women travel writers, had no such expectations, or so stressed the ordinariness of life in the Orient, comparing rather than contrasting the lifestyle of women in her own culture and in Turkey. So Julia Pardo didn't find any difference between the women in English and the women in Turks. So she got the similarity between the women live in Europe and live in Turkey. It is also worth noting that women travelers in Turkey and the other Oriental lands had access to the closed rooms that provided the locus of the sexual fantasy of the European men excluded from them. So there is an analogy that if a woman become a travel writer, she will have the access to the exclusive private rooms of entertainment or the harem. Okay, but the male travel writer are not allowed to the exclusively secret room of harem. This is their, so their accounts, that means the female traveler's account, derived from the first-hand experience. So the male writer, they are writing their story about the Turkish women. This is not the first-hand experience because they didn't have the entrance to harem. However, the female tribal writers, they had access to the harem, and for this reason, what they have written, that is the first-hand experience of the uh, women of Turkey, rather than the from imagined impression of harem life. There is particularly ironic if you consider the different attitude of truthfulness of male and female travel writers in the 18th and 19th century. So Sarah Mills reminds us that it is essential to consider the text within the discursive framework that produces them. So Sarah Mills, she has come with another explanation. She said that it is important to consider both the production and the reception of the text. And for this reason, how the literature, how the travel writings are produced, we have to take it consideration, and how it is accepted by the reader. Both portions should be considered equally, giving equal importance in case of comparative literature. So in case of comparative literature, we can see only the one-sided notion of the traveler's tale. So after getting the traveler's tale, we have to understand the production procedures of the text and also the reception criteria of the text, how this text is received by the readers and how this text is produced. That is claimed by Sarah Mills. And since the way we read is largely a product of discursive framework, and she also claimed in a very direct way that the production of literature, especially the traveler's tale, are produced in a very discursive way. And for this reason, we should take these issues in consideration. The division male and female is obviously not a satisfactory way of describing differences between text, as many women write within the same discursive framework as men. So here, Sarah Mill discarded that notion that the female travel writer experience is the first-hand experience. Sarah Mill claimed that many female writers, they have written something just like the male travel writers. However, the difference may be a result of judgment made about their text rather than any intrinsic differences. So Sarah Mill, she has called that actually a text should be just according to the text, not by the writer, whether they are female or male writers. So map making, traveling, and translating are not transparent activities. After getting the experience, the long discussion of two classes, previously we have this constructing traveler's tale. We see that map making, travel journey, that means the traveler, and the journey, stories of tales, and the translating are not transparent activities of literature. They are very definitely located activities within points of origin, points of departure and destination. The great development of comparative literary studies is that such questions are now on our agenda. If comparative literature wouldn't start its journey as a distinctive form of literature analysis, then such kind of consideration wouldn't come in our mind. That is the uh, uh, worth mentioning note. That is the note that is very important, that comparative literature discusses such kind of issues, that is map making, traveling, and translating are not the transparent activities. The time has come not only for us to compare accounts by travelers, but to question the premises on which those accounts were written in the first place. So, after getting a text, traveler text or travel journey, we will be comparing the journey or the text. It is not the way of comparative literature. That means we have to discuss, or we have to ask the question on which the such kind of writings were written. And like John D., we have discussed earlier, we too are in the process of moving from simply mapping to the far more sophisticated science of balancing different system of calculating times and date. Actually, we have to discuss very meticulously in comparative literature the map making, traveling, and translating. So, in this way, we can conclude in such a way, that is the translation work, traveler's story, and also the map making. Such kind of um, literary works can be a issue of comparative literature. Comparatist will be asking the production of comparative literature, how it is produced, and also they will be asking about how this issue was, how this writing was written and when it was written, because we have understood that map making shows the concept of map makers. Translation studies, translation becomes a part of the language in which it is translated. So translation studies became the uh, part of secondary author. However, the original text will be the primary author. In this regard, translators' role plays a very important in comparative literature, and also traveler's tale. We have also have some examples of traveler's tale, that the same situation, the situation of Turkey, has been presented as a sensuous harem culture, but such kind of situation was presented by another English poet, Julia Pardo, that it is very normal and there is no difference between English culture, English women living, and also the Turkish women. So we can conclude that. And what is the role of the comparative literature in these two ways? That means comparative literature or study of in comparative literature will ask the question regarding map making, translation studies, and also the traveler's tales about its production, the time of production, and how it is accepted by the reader all over the world. So thank you very much for attending the class. We will answer question if you have any.
যে স্যার আমার একটা কোশ্চেন, যে যে স্যার এখানে আমাদের মাইন্ড মেকিং, ট্রান্সলেটিং আর এই ট্রাভেলিং এর কথা